Order of operations and evaluating expressions. We use the order of operations when solving problems because if there was not an order to follow, there would be several possible answers for the same problem. The order of operations can sometimes be remembered using the acronym PEMDAS, or sometimes people use the sentence, "Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally." It's the most common sentence to remember the order of operations. The P stands for parentheses. This doesn't have to mean parentheses. It can be any grouping symbol. So parentheses are when also sometimes brackets are used. You're going to perform whatever operation is inside of parentheses first. Then you're going to look for exponents and simplify your exponents. Next, you look for multiplication and division, and you work those in order that they appear from left to right. And then last, you're going to look for both addition and subtraction, and again, you work those in order from left to right as well. The first example asks us to simplify in parentheses 9 minus 3, close the parentheses, squared, divided by 4. I'm going to be using a two-column approach to solve this problem. On the right-hand side, I'm going to explain what I've done, and the left-hand side is just going to be my work. The left-hand side is probably what you're used to showing your work as for an order of operations problem, but I am going to ask you on some problems to do an explanation in a right-hand column as well. So the first thing that we would do is subtract 9 minus 3 because it's inside of the parentheses. So 9 minus 3 is 6, and then bring everything else down just as it appears. So we have 6 squared divided by 4. For the explanation, I wrote first perform the operation inside the parentheses. If you just wanted to write parentheses first or something like that, that's totally fine to be faster to write it. Next, we're going to look for exponents, and in this case, we do have an exponent. 6 squared is 6 times 6, which is 36, and then bring down divided by 4. In the explanation side, I would say next, simplify exponents. And then we're left with one operation, which is division. When you're left with one operation, it's the only thing you can do. 36 divided by 4 is 9, so that's my final answer. And in my explanation, I just put then divide, or you can say last divide or something like that. So the final answer for 9 minus 3 in parentheses squared divided by 4 is 9. The next example, we have 2 to the 5th plus, in parentheses, 11 plus 14, close the parentheses, divided by 5. The order of operations tells us to do whatever is inside of the parentheses first. I do have parentheses. In this case, inside of the parentheses, I have 11 plus 14, which is 25. So I'm going to bring everything else down just as it appears, but I'm going to do 11 plus 14, which is 25. And the explanation is the same as the first explanation in the last problem. First, perform the operation inside the parentheses. Next, you look for exponents. You're not always going to have parentheses and exponents in every problem. So if it's not there, you would just skip that step and move on to multiplication and division. But in this case, again, I do have exponents, 2 to the 5th, if you remember, means to multiply 5 2's together. So it would be 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, which is actually 32. Bring down plus 25 divided by 5. My explanation would be next, simplify exponents. Now we're going to look for either multiplication or division. If there were multiple multiplication and division symbols in the problem, I would work my way from left to right. In this case, I only have one division, which is 25 divided by 5, which is 5. So I'm going to bring down 32 plus 5. My explanation is next, multiply and or divide from left to right. And then the last step is going to be just to add 32 plus 5, which is 37. And I just put the last step is to add. So the final answer for 2 to the 5th plus, in parentheses, 11 plus 14 divided by 5 is 37. Next, we're going to talk about evaluating expressions. to evaluate a variable expression is what we're talking about. You're going to replace or substitute a given number in for the variable. Then you're going to simplify the expression using the order of operations. So this first example says, what is the value of the expression for x equals 3 and y equals 4? We have x squared plus 2x plus 16 plus y squared. Every time I see an x, I'm going to substitute in a 3, and every time I see a y, I'm going to substitute in a 4 or plug in a 4. The one thing that I will say here is when you plug in your 3 for x and your 4 for y, be careful on like the 2x. Remember, 2x means that you're multiplying 2 times whatever x is, which in this case is 3. So it is important to put parentheses around your 3 when you substitute in for that x. So I have 3 squared plus 2 times 3 plus 16 plus 4 squared. Inside of the parentheses is a 3. There's not an operation to perform, so we don't have anything to do inside of parentheses, so we're going to skip that and go to exponents. 3 squared is 9 and 4 squared is 16, so I'm left with 9 plus 2 times 3 plus 16 plus 16. Now I do have multiplication. 2 times 3 is 6, so you'd bring down 9 plus 6 plus 16 plus 16. And when you do all of that addition, you should end up with the answer 47. The next example asks us, what is the value of the expression for x equals 3 and y equals 4 again? We have in parentheses x plus y, close the parentheses squared. So go ahead and substitute in, and you get in parentheses 3 plus 4, close the parentheses squared. Inside of the parentheses is what we need to do first. 3 plus 4 is 7. And then bring down your squared, and 7 squared is 49. This last example says, what is an expression for the spending money you have left after depositing 1/4 of your wages in savings? Evaluate the expression for weekly wages of $40, $60, $80, and $100. If you're depositing 1/4 of the wages, if 1/4 of the wages go to savings, the rest is going to be left for you to spend. So the question is, what part or fraction represents what is left? If 1/4 goes into savings, then you're going to have 3/4 left to spend. So to figure out how much you have left to spend, you would multiply 3/4 times x, where x is your weekly wage. They gave us 4 weekly wages to solve for. So we're going to go ahead and plug in 40 first. So 3/4 times 40. Remember, to multiply fractions, you simply multiply straight across, multiply numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator. So I'm going to go ahead and put 40 over 1, and then multiply straight across, which would give me 120 over 4. And 120 divided by 4 is 30. So if you make $40 in the week, you're going to have $30 to spend. Next, we're going to do the same thing with 60. So 3/4 times 60 over 1 would give you 180 over 4, or 180 divided by 4, which is $45. Next, you're going to do the same thing with 80. So 3/4 times 80, go ahead and put 80 over 1. When you multiply straight across, you're going to get 240 over 4. And 240 divided by 4 is $60. And then last, you're going to use 100 for x. So you would do 100 over 1 times 3/4. When you multiply straight across, you would get 300 over 4, or 300 divided by 4, which is $75.